vocal now.
Nevada's wild horse herds are directly in the crosshairs of the Trump administration's big, beautiful bill. Thanks for joining us here at 6. I'm Denise Valdez.
And I'm Brian Loftus. A tiny part of that massive proposal would cut nearly 30% of the budget for the wild horse program. But that's not all.
It would also remove the language, though, that has long protected Mustangs from being shipped off to foreign slaughterhouses in Canada and Mexico. 8 News Now Chief Investigator George Knapp live in the studio.
Hidden among the multi-trillion-dollar tax cuts and other high-profile controversies is a barely noticeable change that would have profound effects on the nation's wild horse herds, 60% of which are here in Nevada. The legislation has been described as a, quote, bullet to the head of America's Mustangs.
At the start of the 20th century, nearly 2 million Mustangs roamed the American West. 60 years later, there were less than 100,000. Horse herds were considered a nuisance, so they were shot, poisoned, or rounded up to be sent to slaughterhouses. The movement to save the Mustangs started in Nevada and was approved unanimously by Congress. Millions of acres were designated as wild horse habitat. And ever since, the cattle industry and the BLM have worked relentlessly to whittle down the remaining herds, using often brutal helicopter roundups. BLM does its best to keep observers far away from these roundups, precisely because images like these get the public riled up. But what's now on the horizon could supercharge roundup operations.
If you take away all the money and you take away all the protections, what's left?
Nevada Congresswoman Dina Titus championed the Mustangs long before she was elected to Congress. She's alarmed by an obscure change in the massive budget bill, the proposed cut of nearly 30% of the wild horse program's budget, and even more ominous, the removal of language that has for decades prohibited shipping captured Mustangs to foreign slaughterhouses. If you don't want to see what that looks like, look away now. These are horses on their way to being killed and processed at a Mexican meat plant. If the legislation passes as is, it's a scene that could be multiplied tens of thousands of times.
We have letters to the appropriators to be sure that they put the money back in and put those protection provisions back into the language. We've still got a way to fight it, but it's difficult. And you know, wild horses aren't a priority for some people. It's not getting a lot of attention.
Titus does have allies on Capitol Hill. She's one of 9 members of a newly formed Wild Horse Caucus, a rare example of bipartisan cooperation. The caucus argues that the proposed cut to the wild horse program is a tiny drop in the bucket compared to the multi-trillion-dollar effects of the overall budget bill, and that there are other options that are not only cost-effective, but far more humane. Specifically, fertility control efforts that are much cheaper than helicopter roundups and which allow the horses to remain on the range instead of being stashed in government corrals for the rest of their lives. The BLM historically prefers roundups to fertility control.
BLM is a very hidebound agency. You know, they do it one way and they don't want to change it, and this is how they do it, and they're kind of captured by the ranching interests. And ranchers just hate horses because they want their cows and maybe their sheep out there, but they eat a lot more grass and drink a lot more water than these horses do.
He's just become such a fun horse to be around.
Jerry Reynoldson, who spent 35 years campaigning on behalf of the Mustangs, practiced what he preached by adopting 2 young Mustangs captured by the BLM, including this one, Buck, who for the past 20 years has been his, quote, best friend. Reynoldson successfully lobbied his former boss, the late Senator Harry Reid, to secure funding for federal studies of wild horses, including one which recommended the removal of the horse adoption program from the BLM. Other studies confirm that the nearly 2 million head of private livestock grazing on public land causes far more damage to the range than 60 to 70,000 wild horses. Reynoldson's pal Buck died a week ago. He predicts the tens of thousands of horses now held in government facilities could be the first to be sent to foreign slaughterhouses if the budget bill passes, and that the remaining free herds would be targeted next. His comment: the West was settled on the backs of horses, he told us, long before settlers or ranchers arrived. To suggest now they're non-essential simply ignores history in favor of greed.
Advocacy groups for the Mustangs are hoping the public will step up to save the herds. They've scheduled a national call-in day for Tuesday, July 1st, and are asking everyone to dial their senators and members of Congress to ask that the language protecting horses and burros from slaughter be reinstated before it's too late. George Knapp, 8 News Now. Back to you.
Now, if you missed any of this report, you can see it again on our 8 News Now streaming app, Vegas TV app. It's available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, and Roku. And be sure to check out the Special Investigators podcast, where Vanessa Murphy sits down with George, peeling back the curtain on his decades of investigative journalism.